had been so busy with his inventions lately that he didn't even realize what time it is. He should be in bed, he knows, but he couldn't close his eyes and rest when trouble could stir. Shredder's henchman could be roaming somewhere, and he has to be on watch. While he was drinking another cup of coffee, he failed to even notice the doors to his lab had just opened, and 2 pairs of blue eyes were peeking inside. As Donnie was typing away on his computer, he was quickly pulled away from his computer when he heard the sound of footsteps coming into the lab. His reddish-brown eyes turned to find Leo and surprisingly Pinkie Pie in his arms. Leo, wasn't Pinkie Pie? He didn't have time to finish the sentence before Leo quickly slammed his hand over his mouth. Keep it down, Don. I had to sneak into his room without waking up Mikey. I need to get Pinkie Pie. His whisper sounded urgent, which was enough to get Donnie to become aware of the situation. He turned away from his computer system, just in time for Ollie to enter the lab and quickly shut the lab doors behind him. His dark brown eyes were almost wide as saucers, with fear stinging them as he was trying to keep his breath steady, but he was failing badly. The 2 turtles were caught off guard by the sudden appearance of their brother, busting into the lab, scared. Ollie was never scared, unless something went wrong with his siblings. Ollie, what happened? The green masked turtle turned to his twin brother and took a few deep breaths before he replied with a shaky tone. I had a dream about that doll. He pointed to Pinkie, his eyes widening in fear. You wouldn't believe what it was saying to me. Leo and Donnie were almost as surprised as he was. But they couldn't believe it. Pinkie Pie was just a doll, nothing more. Right? Leo turned to Donnie and gulped. We think this doll may be the reason for our dreams. He handed Pinkie towards Donnie, but the purple-masked turtle gently pushed it back. Leo, Ollie, it's probably just dreams. They couldn't mean anything, he said coincidentally, but Leo and Ollie weren't buying it. Unfortunately, Mikey was just walking by the door when his baby blue eyes had caught the sight of Pinkie Pie in his older brother's arms. Alarmed, he used his stealth to sneak inside, and with quick swift, he snatched away Pinkie from Leo's grasp, with a growl leaving his lips. You snatched Pinkie away from me, Leo? Mikey growled. How could you? He snarled. A snarl left the youngest brother's mouth before he turned away and stomped out of the lab, carrying the pink pony doll in his arms, before the blue-masked turtle caught the sight of the doll's eyes staring right at him and his brothers, before catching a sight of her cheeks and turning slightly red. Almost unsettled, he turned to Donnie with hope in his eyes. Donnie, please, once Mikey is distracted or asleep, you need to run a scan on Pinkie, he begged. Donnie could see the fear in the twin older brothers' eyes. He could understand there was something wrong about that doll that was scaring the twin leader and second in command. With no reason to protest, Donnie sighed and nodded. Okay, I'll run a test on the doll, he agreed. Leo and Ollie smiled hopefully before they were suddenly pushed out of the lab. If it will get you both to stop bothering me around 2 a.m. in the morning, he exclaimed quietly as possible. He didn't want to deal with Splinter scolding him for disturbing the slumber of him and the others. Leo and Ollie watched as their younger brother shut himself away in his lab, and before they turned their focus on Mikey, who seemed to be comforting Pinkie Pie while glaring at his older brothers. How dare you try to hurt her? He growled. His eyes burned with anger as Leo and Ollie backed away, slightly shocked to see Mikey angry. Mikey was never the one to get angry so easily, unlike Raph. This was a little uneasy for the two twin brothers, but nonetheless, they didn't like it. Mikey, I didn't mean to take her away. Then why did you? Mikey asked angrily. Leo was starting to get more uneasy of his youngest brother's anger. He wasn't sure if he should continue and suffer more of his anger, or stop and be spared. because we think there's something wrong with it. Ollie's response nearly sent Leo's confidence shattering to bits, because as the response had filled Mikey's question, his baby blue eyes had disappeared into nothing but blank white. He'd that the turtle's eyes do when they're mad or in stealth. Before he knew it, Ollie was on the floor with a red mark on his cheek. Mikey was standing over him, hugging Pinkie Pie close to him as a snarl left his mouth. "Nothing is wrong with my sweet cupcake," he growled angrily. "Pinkie Pie is a sweet girl who is like me. She is a she, not an it. I won't let you take her from me when she helps me. With a dangerous snarl, he stomped off into his room as he carried Pinkie Pie in his arms. Donnie had watched in shock when he was going to come out to get another cup of coffee before he witnessed the scene of Mikey's explosive act. He quickly rushed over to help Ollie up and tended to the red mark. For half of the day, Donnie watched how Mikey locked himself away from him and the others. The only one he would let in was Kofu, much to his and his other brothers' jealousy. He hated how Mikey just locked himself away and didn't let anyone in except Kofu. Much to everyone's surprise, Mikey finally came out of his room when the pizza arrived, but much to their uneasiness, he had brought Pinkie Pie as well. Donnie had watched his little brother do everything around with that pony doll. Like how he put sprinkles on a slice and he tried to feed it to Pinkie, only to look away for a second and the slice was completely gone, while the pizza sauce and sprinkles were all over Pinkie Pie's muzzle. Or when the Orange Masked Turtle was playing a racing game and Pinkie was another racer for 2 players. He figured his brother was going to win, but to his confusion, the screen displayed Pinkie Pie had won. He saw how his brothers and sisters' reaction earlier, and they were as he was expecting. Leo was clearly getting agitated by how Mikey was behaving. Ollie still looked scared from whatever dream he had that night. Raph looked ready to beat Mikey and possibly tear Pinkie Pie apart, and Kofu seemed calmed and relaxed about the situation. The Purple Masked Turtle guessed he was worried about his little brother, especially how long he was spending time with that doll. He was worried that the longer Mikey stays with the doll, he would become more distant from his family and friends. He decided he needed to have a word with Mikey. So later after training, he stopped Mikey from leaving and looked at him. "Mikey, I need to talk to you," he said. To his surprise, he realized Mikey didn't have the doll. The youngest turtle seemed to have caught on to Donnie's gaze and confusion as a stern look formed on his face. "Pinkie's sitting on the couch in front of the..." Mikey's words were cut off when his baby blue eyes looked over to the couch and panic settled on his face expression. He followed his gaze over to the couch and worry settled on his face. There was no sign of anything pink, and no 2 cerulean blue eyes were there. Fear and worry settled in before Mikey bolted and started to search the place for Pinkie Pie. He turned over pillows and the beanbag, but she couldn't be found in any of them. He was about to run to his room when he suddenly skidded to a stop in his tracks. Donnie watched in confusion when his reddish-brown eyes widened when he watched his little brother enter his lab. Not even a minute later, when he heard Mikey yell, "Donnie, get in here now!" He ran into the lab to see why Mikey had to yell out like that. When he was by Mikey's side, he was almost shocked by the sight before him. Pinkie Pie was on a metal silver table, strapped down, looking ready to have surgery. But to Mikey, this was unacceptable. He turned towards Donnie with a look of anger burning in his eyes. However, he did not say anything and just unstrapped the pony plush from the table. Picking her up and holding her in his arms, he glared at Donnie with the same angry look in his eyes. You are not allowed to go anywhere near my sweet cupcake again, he snarled before leaving the lab with Donnie. The purple-masked turtle had never seen the sight of Mikey before, and he was sure he would witness more of it if anything happened to Pinky. This is going to be harder than I thought, he thought to himself. While he walked out of his lab, he was almost shocked to see Mikey placing the same hot pink rose barrette on Pinky between her main and right ear. His worry was soon starting to build up again, and he watched Mikey give the TV remote to Pinky and leave towards the kitchen. He didn't know how to react to this anymore. Maybe a cup of coffee could cool down his nerves. He followed Mikey into the kitchen, and where he found him getting some leftover pizza and a cup of ice water. He wasn't sure or why, but he decided not to question it, since he could feel the angry aura from his little brother. Once he got his large mug of coffee, he left the kitchen to find Mikey and Pinky watching a strange, weird TV show, until he noticed a DVD case. It read, 5 Nights at Maybelle's, with the name Maybelle's designed to be red and bloody. Not interested, he left the living room and went to his room. Maybe I need a break from my lab and sleep for a bit, he suggested to himself. Once in his room, he was drinking his coffee so he could lie down and sleep. Once he finished, he set the mug on his nightstand, lay down on his bed for once, and then closed his eyes as he drifted to dreamland. Pitch black was all his reddish-brown eyes could see. He couldn't see anything around him. He felt like he was floating in the air, as his feet were feeling or even touching the ground. Slowly, Donnie felt the ground slowly appearing below him, and he wasn't floating anymore. Once he was gently placed down onto the ground, he looked around to see anything at all in the darkness. But there was nothing. Suddenly, he felt something slowly appear next to him. It felt warm, but only a little. It felt like the small warmth being felt by a candle's tiny little flame. But it was slowly growing warmer when Donnie finally paid attention to the small pink light being illuminated beside him. He turned his attention and he was met with a beautiful little sight. A brightly glowing hot pink sparkling rose was standing there on the green stem and green leaves poking out. But as his eyes looked at the stem and slowly moved down, he almost felt concerned. Below, the stem was slightly darker and something was sticking out in the shape of a thorn, and it seemed to be sharp as a needle. But as he looked up to stare at the glowing pink rose, the petals on the flower were slowly turning dim, and the light was slowly fading. "What the—" Donnie muttered when he noticed a figure step forward and stand there. When his reddish-brown eyes looked over, he was almost more surprised than he was already. Standing behind the rose was a young mare with a complete resemblance of Pinkie Pie, but she looked different. Her mane and tail were no longer bouncy and curly, but now flat and straight, as well as the bright raspberry pink color gone slightly dim of brightness. Her coat had lost some brightness too. When she slowly looked up, when her mane was covering her eyes, she revealed her bright cerulean blue eyes. Donnie nearly jumped when he saw them, both wide and filled with horror and fear. Her eyes were small as the size of an orange or an apple, as clear tears streamed down her cheeks. Donnie felt so sorry for the sight of the mare, but he couldn't help but feel insecure that she may be looking right at him. He had negative feelings towards himself that he couldn't get rid of, and his siblings weren't helping at all. He heard the pony sniffle back cries and tears when he switched over to look at her. To his surprise, Pinky held a little vial with something purple inside, bubbling. It was a potion. Donnie watched in worry about what she was about to do. Pinkie Pie bit the cork in the bottle and pulled it out, opening it. He watched helplessly as Pinky's lips touched the opening and the contents in the bottle were taken in one gulp. The now empty bottle slipped out of the pink pony's hoof and fell to the ground, shattering into pieces from contact. She panted slightly as her legs began to wobble, as if being turned into jello, and naturally, her mane and tail had poofed back into their original bouncy and curly style. Her eyes began to turn glossy like a doll's eyes. Donnie watched in shock as the pink earth pony, collapsed to the ground with a quiet sigh, leaving her mouth while a smile was formed. The sad expression was gone and turned into a happy one as she was growing smaller and smaller until she was the size of Mikey's doll. Then the whole room went black. The last thing Donnie heard was a high-pitched girl voice.
He keeps me safe and happy. I don't want to lose him like I lost her.